Meeting the Three Witches. Page 8.
Meeting the Three Witches. Lord Macbeth, a great lord and general in the time of King Duncan of Scotland, was returning home from the war in Norway. Macbeth travelled with his friend, Banquo, who was a general, too. Banquo slowly banged on a drum, taken from the hands of a dead drummer boy on the battlefield. The men were dirty and bruised, cut and weary, but the excitement of the battle was still on their bearded faces. Though the men said very little, their spirits were high, their exhausted horses carried them homeward. As they rode across a great hillside, they came upon three witches. They were unearthly-looking hags with beards and scaly, snake-like skin. A storm grew in the sky as Macbeth and his men came nearer to the three creatures who huddled together around a fire. The lightning crashed, the thunder roared and the rain gushed from the sky, but the soldiers did not seek shelter. Macbeth pulled his horse to a halt and tried to speak to the old women, but each of them placed a crooked finger to her lips in a sign of silence. Macbeth listened as the witches stood up one by one and addressed him. He was surprised to hear each creature call him by his name. Even more surprising were the titles which they called him by. The first witch said,
"All hail, Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis."
The second witch said,
"All hail, Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor."
The third witch stood and said,
"All hail, Macbeth, king that shalt be hereafter."
Macbeth did not seek the royal position of Thane of Cawdor, and he knew that while King Duncan's two sons lived, he could not become king.
"If you can look into the seeds of time,"
Macbeth said to them,
"and say which grain will grow and which will not, speak then to me."
The witches turned to Banquo, and each spoke in turn, and in words like a riddle.
"You who will be lesser than Macbeth and greater. You who will be not so happy but much happier. You who will never be king, yet your sons shall be kings of Scotland."
King. The word echoed in Macbeth's mind. King. The very word pounded like a drum. He trembled and grew pale, fearing that Banquo would hear the sound.
"Stay, you imperfect speakers!"
shouted Macbeth.
"Tell me more."
But as he spoke, the creatures vanished. Were they real or imagined? The two men stood, staring at each other in silence, each wondering if the prophecies of the witches could be true. While the two generals stood in their secret thoughts, two messengers from King Duncan arrived on galloping horses. The messengers dismounted their beasts and spoke to Macbeth.
"The king has sent us to tell you that you are now the Thane of Cawdor."
The messengers carried the royal robes to go with Macbeth's new title.
What? Can the devil speak true?
Asked Banquo.
"How can this be?"
Asked Macbeth.
"The Thane of Cawdor lives. Why do you dress me in his robes?"
"The Thane of Cawdor has committed treason and will be put to death,"
answered one of the messengers. Macbeth's thoughts turned to the second prophecy. If one prophecy had come true, why not the other one? Would he be king?
"Do you not hope that your children will become kings of Scotland?"
Macbeth asked his friend.
Now that what the witches promised me has so wonderfully come to pass.
That hope might move you to aim at the throne,
replied Banquo.
But often these ministers of darkness tell us truths in little things, to betray us into deeds of evil consequence.
Dark thoughts filled Macbeth's head, thoughts of how the prophecy might be made to come true. He shook his head.
If chance will have me king,
he reasoned to himself,
why, chance may crown me without a stir.
Macbeth and Banquo travelled to King Duncan's castle before going to their own homes. The king welcomed them home and congratulated them on their victorious battle, and Macbeth's new title as Thane of Cawdor. The king then announced that he and his sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, would visit Macbeth at his home in Inverness the next day.